You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. In less than a week, one of the city's most celebrated music events, the Winnipeg New Music Festival, returns in a modified multi-day hybrid format. Running January 25th, 26th, and 28th, the three-day festival welcomes a reduced in-person audience and limitless online eyes to take in the best of new music. To tell us more, I'm joined by co-curator and Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra composer in residence, Harry Stafylakis. Welcome back to the show, Harry.
Thanks so much, Simon. Always a pleasure to join you here and chat.
And always a pleasure to have you. Last year, WNMF's 30th anniversary, a big year without the big celebration that was planned. You couldn't even make the party given the travel limitations at the time. You're scheduled to be back in Winnipeg for this year's WNMF. That has to feel extra special for you this year.
It feels wonderful to be coming back. I mean, I was there in the fall just to visit and to hang out with the orchestra and with Daniel and to connect with everybody in town and all my friends. Which had been the first time in something like 20 months that I was in town, but really nice to be coming back specifically for the New Music Festival, obviously.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, we're not out of the woods yet. This is another year of reconfigurations and a shortened festival, but still something to celebrate nonetheless. So before we get to it, let me first applaud you and Maestro Daniel Reiskin and the musicians and the organization and all those involved just for the can-do attitude for making this thing happen. It's really special.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. It was quite a challenge to keep pivoting over and over again throughout December and January, but we managed to make something work that we're really excited about.
All right, so let's get right into it. WNMF kicks off Tuesday, the 25th, a program title that will sound familiar to many, a place where we've all been spending a lot of time, Digital Landscapes, exploring the world of technology and mathematics and social commentary.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we'd been planning for a long time was to do something that involved the music of Elliott Britton and Nicole Lizet, especially to highlight them as well. And I have a piece as well as the great Montreal composer, Michael Osterly. So one of the things that these composers have in common is an engagement with science, with technology, and especially Elliott and Nicole tend to engage technology and electronics quite deeply in their music, both on the conceptual side and on the artistic side, the actual musical sounds that are created in quite like novel and interesting and fun ways, often in challenging ways as well, in critical ways, and that comes through in some of the music that we're going to hear.
And, you know, I mean, I was struck by this program for a number of different reasons, but, you know, you mentioned the Montreal connection, but just the number of connections to our province. I mean, you mentioned native Winnipegger Elliott Britton, and then yourself and Nicole Lizet, who is one of the first names that comes to mind when one thinks new music in Canada, who studied at Brandon before making the move to Montreal.
Yeah, that's right. And Elliott's piece, Hyperscale Landscapes, is inspired by the Canadian prairies very much. He's very connected to that side of his upbringing and of his life. And that I think really comes through in this piece.
And then not just the composers, but also the players too. I mean, Gwen Hobig and Carl Stobie, and a recently returned Manitoba face, Ben Reimer, is going to be performing a couple of works, including one of yours. I imagine you two first met in the Montreal music scene. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he's one of the percussionists in Architect Ensemble, which is a percussion quartet in Montreal. And he used to have a duo as well with pianist Vicky Chow. So we've known each other for many years. We've played together on the CBC performance. We've collaborated in various capacities. And this time it's awesome that he's going to be giving the Canadian premiere of my piece for drum set and electronics, which is quite scathing, as I'm sure you'll find out when you hear it. And he has collaborated a lot with Nicole Lizet. She's written quite a few pieces for him, including Katana of Choice, which is a piece featured on his album Katana of Choice for solo percussion and electronics.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, it's going to be a really exciting kickoff to the program.
Oh.
Now, speaking of pivots and reconfigurations and changes, this second concert has undergone a little bit of a shift from the original plan. The aforementioned Vicky Chow was to be here. Instead, will be treated to the playing of Stephen Beck.
Absolutely, yeah. Both colleagues and friends of mine and past collaborators. I've known both Vicky and Stephen for many years. Vicky was supposed to come and give the world premiere of my piano concerto. That couldn't happen because of the pandemic circumstances and provincial guidelines and whatnot. And to give a solo recital for reasons beyond anyone's control. She could not make it, but Steve was an amazing musician, pianist for the Knights and various ensembles in New York, and he plays with the New York Phil, and he's constantly working with composers and premiering work. So he was able to jump in at the last second with a killer program that I'm really excited to be able to present.
Yeah, and a WNMF debut, always special when that happens. And I mean, I know it's a new music festival. I know new things happen all the time, but still,
Right.
to have a new player in Winnipeg,
And,
it's a big deal.
and it's surprising because he is a new music specialist for sure, and plays with some of the most noteworthy ensembles, and yet somehow he's not been to WNMF. So I'm glad that we're rectifying that situation.
Yeah, what an opportunity for a solo performance, a very diverse program. Again, some familiar names on there, including Sarah Kirkland Snyder, a past WNMF Distinguished Composer in 2019. I remember being in the audience whenever we could do that, and that beautiful performance of her tone poem that I still can't pronounce. He writes. I always
You're right.
mispronounce it. He
Yes.
right, yeah, and that accompanying film, it was a real stunner. So excited to hear this solo performance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really wonderful to have Sarah's music again. I mean, between Harith and Penelope, the
Yeah.
monodrama that we had presented that same year, I'm just such a fan of her work. And I think really works with this program, which has really varies from quite avant-garde to quite kind of neo-romantic and just lush and beautiful. So Stephen's really put together a quite diverse program here for sure.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the other composers that are featured?
Well, of course, George Walker is one of the great American composers who died just a few years ago. So this is kind of a memorial performance in a way, but Stevens actually recorded all of George Walker's piano sonatas.
Wow.
And so he'll be performing the third one at this concert. Charles Warren is again, also one of the great American composers, a New York-based composer. One of those pieces was written for Steve Beck, actually. He's collaborated with Warren quite a bit over the years. Olga Neuwirth is one of the great European composers, a younger generation, kind of in the same realm as Sarah Kirkland Snyder. So her music, it tends to be quite conceptual, textural, and more on the avant-garde side, which should be interesting and in terms of sonority. Catherine Balch, I was very pleased to see that Steve suggested this piece. She's a friend of mine. We've known her for many years. She's based in New York. So Two Memories is very much something that a piece that is, I think, resonates with what a lot of artists and composers have been going through, and really kind of becoming introspective and inward looking throughout this pandemic, as our ability to kind of express ourselves to a public has become so much more limited. It's actually given us an opportunity in a sense that we don't often get, which is to really look inward and spend time with ourselves and think about what's meaningful to us sonorically, conceptually, emotionally. So I think a lot of works on this program, as well as on the previous nights, reflect that. And also actually Kelly Marie Murphy's piece on the following night. But
well, I'm so glad you bring that up. If you're just tuning in, I'm chatting with Harry Stafylakis, co-curator and WSO composer in residence, about next week's WNMF. 3 concerts to check out. We've chatted about the first 2, and Harry, as you just alluded to, the final night takes place Friday, and it features Maestro Daniel Reiskin on the podium alongside members of the WSO in a concert titled The Last Word. And you were just talking about composers and players and looking inward and reflecting on the situation that we find ourselves in. And that's exactly what the great Canadian composer Kelly Marie Murphy has done here, right? She's written a musical response to the pandemic and how it's disrupted all of our lives.
That's right, exactly. Entitled In the Time of Our Disbelieving, which is very Kelly Marie Murphy. We should all know Kelly's music. I mean, we've performed it, of course, with the WSO many times over the years. She's one of the great Canadian orchestral composers, as well as of chamber music. And her music, for those who know, tends to be very robust, powerful, dramatic, and with quite programmatic titles, often a long phrase like this, In the Time of Our Disbelieving. So I think we can expect to experience from this piece for string orchestra something that is characteristically Kelly Marie Murphy, which is quite powerful, driving, almost machine-like music in some places. But at the same time, she is very much responding powerfully, emotionally to the damage and the turmoil that she went through and that we've all been going through psychologically and emotionally through the pandemic. I know it's tough to even talk about this kind of in this meta fashion about constantly bringing up the pandemic, but as it relates to the works of art that stem from it, I think it's something quite interesting and quite satisfying that we can get out of it in a cathartic way.
And this is something that artists have always done, right? Responded to the situations that they find themselves in making sense of something, or at least responding to something in a way that words or limited writing can't, right? And so to put that to music, very excited to hear what she's going to do. Just before we get to the last composer that will be featured in the last concert, I'm just curious, as a sort of aside here, Harry, for you, how has Kelly Marie Murphy shaped your orchestral writing, for instance? I mean, I'm thinking about how you write, and you talked about the density and the robustness and the very evocative titles. That sounds a little familiar. Your piece that's going to be performed is "Therein Lies the Enemy." I mean, there's a title right there.
That's interesting that you bring that up. I did not feed you any hints about this, right?
No.
Kelly's actually not. I'm almost reticent to say this because Kelly's a very close friend of mine, and we talk often now. But I have to admit, she's been kind of an idol for me for many years, from when I was a college student at McGill. I first heard a piece of hers, I believe in 2009. That would have been my second year at McGill. That was played over the CVC. I think it was a string quintet or string octet. I forget exactly which one of them it was. But I remember I didn't hear the announcement of what the piece was and what the composer was. I just kind of jumped in when I dialed into the station, and I was blown away. Actually, I had to pull over the car and kind of stop and listen and just go, what the hell is this? Somebody else is doing metal in classical music? This is amazing. And then I learned it was Kelly Marie Murphy. I immediately went and found everything I could of hers, became a huge fan. Yes, in terms of the power of her music, the way that she uses classical instrumentation to get that kind of drive and robustness that I crave from, rock music, from metal music, and she gets it with the classical music. So she was one of my models for sure for that. And also her titles and just her way of interfacing with the world. I mean, there's a page on her website that says they hate me, they really hate me, and it's just negative reviews from performances of her works. And I thought that was, oh yeah, that's a great way to like take it in and own it.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm gonna have to go check that page out after we finish chatting. Anyway, one last composer featured, Sofia Batalina, honoring one of the greats. She just turned 90 this past October.
That's right. Yeah, we would have loved to invite her, but travel is difficult enough as it is. But at her age, it would have been very much impractical. But she is one of the legends. She's in the history books, one of the great Russian and really international composers. And this is quite a powerful, again, introspective piece, even though it's relatively small. It's almost string orchestra with solo cello and solo bayan. It's big in scope, certainly. It's a long piece. And also there's going to be some verbal presentations from Yuri Hooker, who is WSO's principal cellist, who's going to be giving little excerpts of text, of spiritual-based text that is related to each of the movements of Gubaidulina's 7 words. So although it sounds like maybe it's going to be a bit of a kind of lower energy ending to the festival, I think it's going to be quite powerful from a conceptual and emotional standpoint.
Yeah, and this, again, music that is featured for chamber ensemble, smaller ensemble, cello and bayan, which, just to not skip past, is an accordion-like instrument, right? A button accordion.
Exactly right. And Roman Yusupe, who's the bayan player, who's joining us from, I believe he'll be flying in from the Ukraine just for this performance, is a specialist, and he's performed this work before. He's worked with Daniel Reiskin before. So I think we have a great team to put this together. And not just chamber ensemble, right? It's chamber orchestra with the string orchestra. So it is still quite expansive from that standpoint.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a great show. Lots to check out. WNMF, 3 concerts. Harry, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us about this year's goings on. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure, and really looking forward to seeing you in person and my fellow Winnipeggers in person in a few days.
The Winnipeg New Music Festival takes place next week, January 25th, 26th, 28th. Limited 250-person audience expected to be in attendance, though with changing public health restrictions, the online option presents patrons with the opportunity to watch from the comfort of home. WNMF passes, $79. Individual tickets start at $25, with live stream passes and one-time access codes at $29 and $10. And if I just skipped over that too quickly, WNMF.ca, the place to go for more details, or classic107.com.